I'd like to welcome everybody to Clergy Talk Podcast, The World Wants to Know. And today's episode, my guest is Sue Bowles. With that being said, please take it away and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you having me on. As you said, my name is Sue. I am a master certified life coach. I am a speaker. I'm an award-winning author. And most of all, I'm a Christian who really wants to speak to Christians who are struggling with some kind of mental health struggle. That's something that's really on my heart. I know mental health has come to the forefront right now with the pandemic, but it's been there long before then. So I'm thankful for the opportunity now that people are willing to talk about it. And when I speak on podcasts or on the stage or conference presentations or even in my books, the main message is that it's okay to not be okay. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think as believers, we shoot our own, and it's not the way it's supposed to be, because I think we can pray away things, or if you only have enough faith, or anything like that. And I'm not discounting the power of prayer. I'm not discounting the strength of faith, but I am saying that we live in a fallen world, and that mental health struggles usually have some kind of biological and genetic base because we are fallen individuals. And that doesn't mean that we're lacking faith. It doesn't mean that we're not praying. It doesn't mean that we've done something that God's punishing us for. It simply means that we live in a fallen world, and it is a result of that fall. And I think the more that we are able as believers to be able to come to understand that a little more and start breaking down that stigma, then the more we can be the body of Christ, the more we are going to be able to come along each other, bear one another's burdens, and actually be what the Bible tells us to be. But I think we've let so much of society in our own assumptions and maybe false beliefs or false interpretations of things to cloud how we interact, that I honestly think some churches just don't know how to handle and how to help someone who might be struggling with something.
Okay, now I know the church has come a long way since, let's say, 50 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
When every pastor and his cousin thought that if you had a mental health issue, you're demonically possessed.
Yeah.
But that's not the case, because I know there's some times in my life where I was taking care of a relative and it just really took a toll on me. So I had to go talk to a therapist. I said, I need to let it out. I need to talk to somebody. I didn't come back. I just wanted to vent that one day. But I had enough sense to know I need to talk to somebody, And of course I prayed about it too, but sometimes just talking to somebody, and just somebody who's trained, in that profession, helps a lot, because I spend all my day listening to people too, because I work in a mission and stuff. So, and I'm looking at a lot of problems every single day. But with that being said, the church has come a long way. However, we're still not there yet.
Very much so. And that's why my heart is to speak to believers, because I was one of those broken believers. I was one of those who was scarred and wounded and held on the sidelines by all of that. And because I had childhood trauma, I had trauma throughout my high school years. I developed an eating disorder in college. I've been twice suicidal. I've dealt with my parents divorced after 31 years of marriage. We just lost my mom 15 months ago. I was her caregiver. So I have dealt with so much stuff in my life that, and because I didn't know how to deal with it, because no one was talking about it, because I didn't know how to express myself, I was suffering, and I was in silence. And it was coming out in other ways, because there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And the body will, whatever is going on inside you, you can try to cover it, but it's going to come out in some way. It will find a way out. And mine was finding ways out in very unhealthy ways. But I didn't know how to reach out for help and really say, this is what's going on. And I don't think that people knew how to help me, because I didn't know how to help either. So I was one of those broken people, but I've since found that healing. And no, it wasn't like that. No, it wasn't somebody anointed me with oil and I was done.
It
has been a long process. I was raped when I was 7 years old by a
Oh my
classmate.
God. Wow.
I did not tell anybody until my senior year of college.
Mm.
That was in the 80s. I did not deal with that event until over 4 decades later. In
Wow.
2014, I finally started dealing with it.
Mm.
So if you can imagine when you are 7 years old,
Mm-hmm.
your brain is really starting to develop, and you have a life-altering trauma. It is scientifically proven. You can find it on the internet, scans of the brain, that a trauma literally rewires your brain. So my brain was rewired at 7 years old. I tell people when I speak, my emotions were frozen in time. The longer you are in the freezer, the thicker the ice gets. Think of when you're cleaning out your freezer, the thing that's stuck in the far back corner. How thick is the frost on that thing?
Too thick.
That's what my emotions were.
Wow.
By the time I finally got connected with a Christian counselor, and for the first, honestly, 4 or 5 years, 6 years, we were just trying to get me stronger in the present so that I could then go back and deal with the past.
Wow.
But it wasn't until 2014 I finally started finding some healing. So it is not for the faint of heart. I know that, but I'm here to be a voice of hope for people and say it is possible. If you had told me in 2014 I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have laughed you off the face of the earth, because I called myself the holy exception. The enemy had convinced me. I had bought the lie that everything in the Bible was good enough for everybody else but me, because I was too screwed up, too far gone, too scarred. And I was just wasting space. And that's what I felt like. And I came across a retreat program where people were Jesus with skin on. And that started melting my heart. And it was over the course of a number of years. I am still with my counselor now. I have been with her for 13 and a half years. And we're still finding stuff. We're actually, there was some spiritual abuse in my life in the past that has kind of come to the surface in some other ways. The effects of it have come to surface in other ways that we're dealing with right now. So, it's a journey. It can happen overnight, but that's not my experience. But I can tell you that all along, I have felt and experienced the love of Christ through others, because I finally got to the point where I was willing to say, I need some help.
Well, you said something that really struck a nerve with me when you said trauma rewires the brain.
Oh, yeah.
That struck a nerve, because I've been into some pretty hostile events in my life and other stuff. And I'm trying to figure out how many times has my brain been rewired. I'm smiling, but I'm not smiling. You know what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
That's like the smack in the face. Wow, Mike, you never looked at all this stuff, And I've been injured close to death a couple of times, and dealt with illnesses and then dealt with social trauma as well. And I never thought that it rewires your brain, because I created this person to deal with it,
Right.
Captain Cool, I'm okay. I can handle everything, and that was the mask. And as I got older, when I dealt with it, I had a big cry, Tears were just,
Yep.
And I needed that. Yep. And, I think during the course of process, not right away, I did seek therapy. Like, I was a caregiver for a minute. And after that was over with, I talked to a therapist for a minute, because I needed to deal with that. And then during that session, I talked about a whole bunch of other stuff that I wasn't even planning on talking about.
Yep.
I said, I got you. You're mine now for an hour.
Yep. And that's just it, is that people don't understand there is so much that goes on underneath the surface. And yes, you talked about the mask you wore. I wore a mask in college. I wore a mask all the way through high school and graduate school.
Right. Wow.
Sue had it all together. Sue was the strong one. Sue didn't need any help. And because of that mask, that's where my eating disorder developed. Because just real quick, an eating disorder is a mental health struggle. It is a mental health issue. It is the second most lethal of all mental health illnesses. Second only to opioid addiction. And the reason for that, not only because of the suicide that's involved with eating disorders and depression, but also because of the intrinsic damage that people with eating disorders do to their bodies over time. The body keeps the score. That's how the body keeps the score. So even though, you may look at me and say, you don't look like you have an eating disorder. I do. I don't have one of the big 3 eating disorders, but I have OSFED, which is other specified feeding and eating disorders. So there are so many more, and there are so many stigmas just about eating disorders. That's another topic I talk about at other times. But excuse me. But within that, there are so many things that go on that, yes, we wear a mask. When your brain is rewired because of trauma, you go into fight, flight, or hide mode. And you're either constantly guarded, constantly hiding, or constantly running. And that, so you talk about the mask, you realize how it had affected you. I'm dealing with things now where, because I've mentioned some past spiritual abuse, where it has made it more challenging for me to really let people into my life, on a day-to-day basis in deep ways, in terms of having good, strong connection and friendships beyond just, hi, how you doing, and that kind of thing. And I didn't realize until really a few weeks ago, as my therapist and I were digging into it, that had to do with those situations that happened in the 80s and the early 90s. So, it's easy to think, oh, I'm good. My guess is that there's something else deeper down that you've just gotten really good at covering.
Wow. I had a conversation with a friend of mine long time ago, and she said, she wasn't talking directly at me, but she was.
Yeah.
She said, Mike, the child that got hurt caused you to create a protector. And when that protector thinks that child's going to get hurt again, he goes into kill mode.
Yep.
And I said, yeah, blah, 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 blah. But on down the road, I thought about it. And I said, yeah, there's a child in me that got hurt.
Right.
And I created this protector. And when that child is threatened, the protector takes over.
Right.
He says, get in the back seat. I got the wheel and I'm going to fix this.
Right.
Any way I can. And then I said to myself, well, what other kind of personality has gotten created because of that? Not that I'm multi-personality, because I got a pretty good grasp of who I am now, based on the healing process I went through, which was, part spiritual and just part being able to talk to people and say, hey, look,
right,
how you feel about this? This happened to me then, blah, 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 And I think that was a healing process that didn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't.
It happened with me talking to several different people and just talking about stuff that I wanted to share because I didn't want to keep it in no more.
Right.
Because I realized when you keep stuff in, you just get jacked up even more and more and more and more. And just anyway, with that being said, keep on going, please, because I'm learning stuff right now.
When you were talking a minute ago, excuse me, about how you keep it in, you get jacked up more and more. Yeah. That's because our self-talk goes off the rail. Because we're talking to ourselves, and the scary part is we're listening to ourselves.
Wow.
That's the scary part.
Wow.
Because we are not kind to ourselves. Now I know all of us have high expectations of ourselves.
True.
But when you don't meet a goal, say you're at the office and you make a mistake, what's my question to people is, when I'm working with clients, what goes through your mind? What are you telling yourself? When you're called into the boss's office, he's like, hey, something got goofed up on this report, I need you to do it again. Do you walk out of there feeling like saying, I'm such a screw up, I can't believe I did that, I'm going to get fired because I can't do anything right? Is that where your brain goes? Or you say, okay, I'm glad he caught it for me so I can make it right for the company and then I can get going again. Two very different worlds of thought and talk. And that self-talk, and it's just where our brains go. But the question is, why do our brains go that way? Why is that insecurity there, where we feel like we are based on our performance and not who we are?
Right.
So all of these things get tied up. I wore, like I said, I wore masks in college. My senior year of college, I coordinated 3 major events. And it's in a few months of each other. I was the homecoming chair, I did the winter formal, and I did an 18-hour dance-a-thon.
Wow.
while taking classes, while working 20 hours a week and being in a sorority and little sister of a fraternity and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was not healthy. But it was because at that point, and I've since learned this, and I wrote my book, it kind of helped me learn a lot about myself at the same time. And what I learned is that I was insecure because I felt I was valued if I was seen. So I was seen when I was over involved, and therefore I mattered. And the other part of it, as my eating disorder started kicking in, was that if I stayed busy, I didn't have to think. If I didn't have to think, I didn't have to feel. And if I didn't have to feel, I didn't have to deal with my stuff. So it's been interesting to learn all these things about myself and to catch myself when I'm going into that again.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's, we are very complex individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think people slow down enough to really get to know themselves.
Right.
And my guess is that somewhere a listener, when I said that, in their mind it went, I don't know who I am, or I'm scared to know who I am. And if that was the thought, my question is, what's driving that? What's under that? Because that's a mask.
Wow. I gave an analogy. And I don't know if I'm the creator of this analogy, but it goes like this. One person falls off a bridge, gets up, laughs it off, keeps on going. Another person falls off a bridge and never gets on a bridge again.
Right.
So I think that's how it is with life sometimes. One person goes into a life-altering, mind-shaking event, and for some strange reason, they manage to function. Another person shuts down completely. And I'm trying to, and I'm beginning to rethink that concept altogether, because even though the person who went through that same event appears to be functioning, inside there's a storm going on that's all over the place. Possible. Yeah.
Very possibly. Yeah. Very possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, to one degree or the other. When my mom passed, I was her caregiver. She lived with me since 1997.
Okay.
Over the last 8 years of her life, as her health started to decline, I became a caregiver. And even though that was such a tumultuous time, I mean, it's only 15 months ago, but it's while we were heartbroken, we still had, as the Bible calls it, the peace that passes all understanding. And I can't tell you, if I tell people, they probably think I'm crazy, but we found a way to even have a little fun in the hospital room. And not that what we were going through was fun at all. Not at all. Mom didn't wake up for the last 7 days of her life. Yet we had nieces and nephews and friends and family calling and leaving messages, texting messages, doing video, audio messages that were playing for her, so everyone could be involved in the sanctity of what was happening. We even just simply, like, we put on Pandora next to her ear so she heard it playing while we weren't able to be in the room. And there were so many other things. Even when, like, years ago, she was over in rehab after being in the hospital for 6 weeks. And, Friday night was family fun night. So my brother and I, it was about a mile from our house. My brother and I would go over, and we'd bring outside dinner, and we'd play cards in the day room,
Wow.
Now she's trying to get strong again, and she was insanely weak for a while, yet we still managed to have fun, So it is a mindset. It does not come easy. And even that mindset is because of a lot of work that's been done and a sure foundation. Because even those experiences I just shared could be looked at as a mask of what you're really feeling. They were not. They were very genuine, because one, Mom was a believer, and I knew where she was going.
Right.
The presence of God was so thick in that room. It was so thick. And even the day she passed is such a treasured moment for me. And helped me understand some of the verses, how precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his loved ones, and I understand that in a whole different way now. It doesn't mean I didn't cry a lot of tears.
Right.
And I had been with my counselor, going every other week And I had told her, whenever it comes and mom passes, we're going weekly. We've been weekly since for the last 15 months, you know?
Wow,
So,
wow.
but I wouldn't be this far along without that help.
Wow, that's amazing. I think a lot of men are scared to get help.
Yep.
And even within my culture, probably more in my culture, they're just scared to say, you know, I need to go see a therapist. They're scared to say, I need to talk about this. And not just my culture, but probably men in general, you know, they don't want to deal with that stuff that happened on the playground where they got punched in the nose by somebody, you know, went home and told dad will say, suck it up, buttercup, be a man, you know.
Right.
But I got punched in the nose at 5 years old. That's what the guy's saying, use that as an analogy. Sure. And like you said, like I just learned today, every trauma rewires the brain, and getting punched in the nose is a trauma. You know? Right. So we as men, we go, well, you know, and me being a baby boomer, of course, you don't cry as a baby boomer. That's like, no. And then the 80s turned around and I said, Lord, help this generation to cry babies. And then I come to the realization, maybe they had something then, you know, maybe it made a lot of sense, but and I think I would encourage, if you're a male listening to this episode and something has happened to you, go get a therapist, you know, talk to somebody, you know, do something, because you can't do therapy on yourself. That's one thing I know for a fact, you know, it's not going to work. So what was the, what actually caused you to actually seek out a therapist? What was the throw your hands up, I quit, I got to get help moment for you?
Well, I'd been seeing a counselor at different points in time just because I had sense something wasn't right. Then I had a number of years where I wasn't. Everything seemed to be fine. My eating was fine and everything. In 2005, I lost a very dear friend to cancer. And when 3 years later, I was grieving her like yesterday.
Wow.
And then my red flags for my eating disorder were starting to pop up. So that was I got hold of my pastor, and he connected me with a Christian counselor who also specializes in trauma and PTSD and eating disorders and everything. And I have been with Amanda since. In fact, I have her this afternoon after this podcast. And that was what started it. Now, now I went in, about the eating disorder and stuff. Now, Amanda, she is the first counselor who ever really gave me homework. And my homework the first week was to write down my life timeline. And then we spent time over the next 3 or 4 sessions going over it. Well, by the second or third session, it came out about the rape. And she looked at me and said, this is huge. Have you ever dealt with it? I said, I wouldn't know what it looks like to know that I've dealt with it. And I said, I guess that's your answer. That was 2008. It took us 6 years till we could get me ready to deal with it. So, so that was my throw up my hands moment. I think within that, I told her early on, I said, if I am going to do this, I am not stopping until we're done, because I'm not starting over again. Because what had been the pattern, the pattern was that, I'd be fine for a while and then I'd get out of counseling, and it might take a longer period of time, but over time, it would kind of all start coming back again. So I looked at Amanda about the third or fourth session in, and I said, what do you think it is? What's kicking the eating disorder? And she said, I think it's just a bunch of unresolved issues. And it was. Now I've been in recovery from my eating disorder since 2016. Doesn't mean I don't struggle. I still have my dietitian I get with every 3 weeks, and she's part of my treatment team. When mom's been in the hospital, or when she was passing, I was in constant touch with them, because when stress is high, it's easy for an eating disorder to kind of take over, and you easily forget to eat. So you're trying to have that. I want to jump back real quick to your analogy about being punched in the face at 5. Right. For your listeners, the reason Michael was saying reach out and dig into that is because while it happened a long time ago, you think, oh, no, it doesn't bother me anymore. My guess, the thought that went through my mind, is that if you're punched in the playground on the playground at 5, went home, told a parent they were not supportive. You were not defended. Therefore, you didn't feel valued. Therefore, you felt like you didn't have a voice.
Right.
All at age 5. Think of how that came into play throughout the rest of your life. So instead of feeling protected, you felt unprotected. Therefore, you became the macho man to protect yourself.
Yep.
It's not how you've always been. It's only what you've known. But that can be changed because, again, there is still a 5-year-old little boy who wants to be loved, who wants to be protected, who wants to know they matter for who they are, not what they do or what they don't do. And all of those, and that's what I mean. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on underneath that we don't think about.
Oh, I believe it.
Because then you think about that. Okay, how does that become your drive and determination for work? Is it, I got to be tough, so I got to keep climbing the ladder, and then your relationships suffer? Because
put on the game face,
put on the game face. I got to do this. I got to prove myself. I got to prove that I have value. And your wife and your children are suffering because you don't know how to build a relationship with them or how to maintain that relationship with them. It is so intertwined, and people don't understand that. So I wanted to come back to that just as an example of why we want to talk about these things. Now, it doesn't mean that every person has a trauma in their life.
Right.
I'm a master certified life coach. I work with clients who want something better for themselves. And don't want to stop until they get it. Right. I work with clients who are driven to get where they want to go. And what's cool is, a year ago, this time last year, I had a mother-daughter reach out to me. They had a major falling out from COVID the previous Thanksgiving. They had rated their relationship about a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
When they came to me after the fallout, they said it was down to about 4 out of 10. And
then, my God.
After about 3 or 4 months, they said, we're back to an 8, and we think you've given us the tools, we can take it from here. What they were dealing with was learning how to communicate. These are 2 grown adult women that were learning that they were making assumptions, that they were not fully listening, that they were not understanding it from the other person's perspective, all because of this fallout. And it brought out some stuff, but now they've experienced healing. It's been over a year. They're doing great. The daughter is pregnant and going to be a mom again.
Okay.
The mother's going to be a grandmom again. So, and all of that was issues of contention. So it's neat to be able to see that. So as a life coach, I can help. And that's what I want to be a resource. So if your listeners are in need of something, if they want to try to work through some of these things, now there are boundaries between coaching and counseling.
Right.
I'm up against those. I will work that through with them. And if it's something that I am not qualified or ethically able to help work through, then I will certainly help connect them to resources.
Right.
But if it's relationship issues, communication issues, job, career, boundaries, finances, general stress, general anxiety, social anxiety is a huge thing right now. I have a client I'm working with right now who is a male, who was very, very hesitant to get involved, to reach out to anyone, to leave his house and try to interact with people, because I don't know how to anymore. And we've been working on that, and now he wants to be a leader at his church.
Wow.
And yes, this is a grown man, and now he wants to work towards a career change. So we're working with that. I worked with a gentleman out in Nevada last year who was tired of his career in a very technical field and wanted to start his own business. So we were working through that. So there are men out there who are reaching out because they want something better for themselves. And I can be a resource and help them with that as well.
Okay, so now I got to ask this question.
Sure.
Women and men, I know women and men deal with stuff differently, or that's what I think, or that's what I've been told. So
it's how God wired us.
Yeah, really, pretty much. So is it easier to work with other women, that are seeking change, or is it easier to work with men?
I haven't really seen a difference.
Hmm.
Because again, the people that I work with want something better.
Right.
And they have an idea of what they want.
Okay.
And I get to help them see their dream become reality.
Okay.
So because they are determining what they want and how they're going to go about, and then we work with the best way to help them get it and develop those skills so they can get it. I don't see a difference, because when they come to me, they're hungry, they're eager, they might be hurting,
right.
They might be confused and not knowing which end is up. But we start picking that apart. The gentleman I'm working with, with the career change right now, we spent time recently just talking about, okay, what's a career change and not sure what. So we talked about what interests you. What skills do you have now? What do you want to develop? What do you want to leave at the wayside? And we just started digging in. So again, because my clients already know what they want, they just don't know how to get there.
Right.
They're already motivated. So yeah, I don't really see a difference.
Okay. And the next question is this: do men and women deal with trauma differently, or is that the same?
How someone deals with trauma is a highly individual situation, because it's affected, it's affected by your environment. It's affected by your family, your relationships, your foundation. So no trauma is dealt with the same by any individual. Because that traumatic experience is specific and unique to the person who unfortunately experienced it. And just as I'm not going to tell somebody, I know exactly how you feel. I don't know how you feel, because I am not you.
True. Right.
I may have something I can draw from to help me relate.
Right.
I do not know how you feel, because I am not you.
Exactly.
So for the exact same reason, a response to trauma is individualized because it happened to an individual.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, because I consider myself to be a very empathetic person, versus I kind of like, I understand what you're going through, and I can feel your pain, versus I may not understand, how you're dealing with it, but I kind of feel it,
Right.
Versus some people are compassionate. Well, yeah, whatever. But are you feeling what they're feeling though? So,
right.
You can say, oh, poor baby, that never should have happened. Anyway, see you later. But, me, somebody tells me something that happened to them, I might think about it for a couple of days, because I'm trying to get it in my head. Oh, wow, I'm trying to walk in that person's shoes. I'm going like, wow, and a lot of times I can't even grasp it, or grasp what they're feeling with, but I kind of understand it. I guess it's because in my life, I've had my moments, where I've the smack in the face moments where, why this happened,
Right.
But I think through a period of spiritual growth, talking to people and having a big cry a couple times helped me to get rewired right on the right track, which caused me to become a better pastor, a better minister, and pretty good doing my career that I'm finally get a chance to work in, that I've wanted to work in all my life, but I know God knew I wasn't ready at a point when I had all this garbage in my closet. So, which caused me to be a potential maybe walking time bomb, until I address those issues. And I think that I think we as human beings have a lot of issues that some are small, some are huge.
What's interesting, when I was in 8th grade, you have your little class book and everybody signs it. Somebody signed my class book to the girl who's always mad. And I did not realize for the longest time how truthful that was.
Wow.
Like Monica saw something that I did not. And that's not me anymore. But here in 8th grade, she was seeing it. I'm like, how insightful was that? Here, another point I wanted to make real quick. You're talking about different tiers. As I've walked my healing journey, I mentioned a retreat program I became part of. Became part of walking stick retreats, and It's the living legacy of Rich Mullins, who was a Christian musician in the 90s. His big song was Awesome God. And we get together, and the whole concept behind Walking Stick is that we all need help along our journey.
Right,
so
right, right.
Help along our journey. Well, the first year, I went in and I was imploding. It was the year we were dealing with the rape. Since I have an eating disorder, emotions are not my friend. And of course, when you're dealing with something traumatic, you're dealing with a lot of emotions. And I was starting to implode. I was not doing well. A staff member since said that it was as if that first year was a type of Hail Mary for me, of going to it, of it's my Hail Mary pass. Could God really love me? Am I really lovable?
Wow.
And I mentioned before, I went into that retreat calling myself the holy exception. That everything, I was on the outside looking in, and there's no way I was going to get in. Even though I was a believer, I left there being able to say for the first time and starting to believe that Jesus Christ loves me. And he not only loves me, he likes me. He's absolutely crazy about me. Now that started a whole process. The next year, and what happened was I had to own my story. I was in denial about my story, and I hated my story. And I had to come face to face with my story that weekend. And I did. And I cried hard.
Wow.
And what was cool, in front of 50 people. But what's cool with 50 people around me. But what's cool is that this retreat sets up a Facebook group a few weeks before the retreat, so we can get to know each other. That first year, we were all strangers, and they asked us to be bold and share our story. I lurked in that room. I stalked others. I commented on others, encouraged others, but I wasn't sharing my story until about 4 days in. And one day I finally wrote it. It was the first time I had publicly shared my story.
Wow.
Some of my siblings didn't even know my story at this point. And I waited all day long. I remember hitting send and post, and I was like shaking, like body tremor shaking from nerves. And I waited all day long, waiting for the response that I had known all my life. You're such a screw up. It's all your fault. Why, all this others, all the blaming and everything. Here I am 7.5 years later, and I can tell you not one comment like that has ever been made.
Wow.
Instead it was, you're so brave. I want to give you a hug. I can't wait to meet you. Thank you for sharing and trusting us.
That's wonderful.
That started to show me that I was lovable and that I mattered. Now, the next year at retreat, I had to grieve my story. There is a lot of loss in my story. 7 and all the way through all kinds of other stuff that I had never grieved. But to heal, you have to grieve.
Yep.
You're talking about tears. There are your tears. You can look at them under the microscope, and depending on what your tears are releasing, your tears have a different makeup.
Yep. Yeah.
Grief tears and happy tears and onion tears are 3 different things.
Exactly.
That's how complex we are. So I literally was dry heave coughing, crying that hard for about 15 minutes.
Wow.
And yet nobody said a word. Someone came over, put his arm around me, and I later found out, prayed, God, whatever it is, put it on me. And that was in the middle of a very, very special time at a retreat on Saturday night. And that was the year I grieved my story and started letting it go. The next year, now that I had that, I don't want to say out of the way, but I had those first two paramount things dealt with. Then God could start pouring me in, because he had to empty out all the junk that I was hanging on to before he could pour in. And that process is painful on both ends of it. But when he started pouring in the next year, this is when things started to turn for me. I walked away with the nugget that I am valuable to God. And my challenge to your listeners is dare to believe that you matter. I dare you to believe, because when I started to dare to believe that I mattered, when I dared to believe that I am valuable to God, that's when things started to change. That's when the book started really starting to take off. That's when I started having more courage to deal with the crap in my life, because I was for my counselor what I say my clients are for me. I knew I wanted something better for myself, and I wasn't stopping until I get it.
Wow.
And now here I am, 2022, Master Certified Life Coach, frequent podcast guest, award-winning author, the whole deal. And my greatest joy, though, is having this one-on-one and group conversations with my clients.
Wow.
Because I get to come alongside them.
I really relate to that because, we have layers. Everybody has layers. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to make yourself relive an event that you don't want to deal with. You know? Right. So I know during my healing process, a couple things. I lost my mom when I was 10. Of course, I cried at the funeral, but I think at 32 years old, I cried again. Mm-hmm. And those were the real tears, Right. Yeah. That was the stuff of me bottling up, saying, I didn't have a mom growing up. I had nobody to teach me about women. I had to figure this stuff out on my own. Which
it doesn't work that way.
Which I probably figured it out wrong,
Yeah, it doesn't work that way.
Right, it doesn't work at all. But I think a mother is very important in a son's life. He has to see that nurturing, the loving, the you bruised your knee, and all that stuff, Mm-hmm. So the real tears came at 32 years old, And that was something I bottled up for 22 years. Mm-hmm. I said, I ain't dealing with that. I don't even want to deal with it. I don't even want to go there because that means I got to relive that event, and I don't want to do that. So there's a lot of people walking around with events they don't want to relive. Right. They'd rather just say, I'm okay. If I'm okay, you're okay. So we're all okay, right?
And they're lying to themselves and each other.
Yeah. And then relationships go wrong, stuff comes out of work.
Yeah. I mean, I was on retreat earlier this year. Or late last year, and in my small group, somebody said, so we're talking about masks again, and somebody said something that I looked at and said, ouch. And yes. And she simply said, masks are sin. We're bearing false witness.
Yeah.
We're not being authentic. And more than that, we're not laying down that living sacrifice. We keep crawling off the altar, and when we wear a mask, we let it keep crawling because we don't want to deal with it. We don't want to say, God, it hurts to lay my heart open to you, and I'm going to let you do your open heart surgery without anesthesia anyway.
Wow.
And instead, what to say in Hebrews, talk about we are a living sacrifice. A living sacrifice likes to crawl off the altar, and you got to keep crawling it back up there and nail it there again until it tries to, it's a constant battle. But when we wear our masks, when we're like, I'm just not dealing with that. That's part of your heart that Jesus Christ wants. Right. And you're denying him of it.
Right.
And you're not letting him be Lord of that part of your life. And when we know in other aspects, when he's Lord of our life, we know how well things go. But it's like, no, God, you're just not good enough for this part. This part, you can cover everything else, but you can't do this part. That's like me. That's like me saying I was the holy exception. That's like saying, okay, God, you got everything else, but that area, that's the holy exception. That one's too screwed up, too far gone for you to touch. That's what we're saying. That's when we are when we aren't letting God be fully Lord of our lives.
Then
we're doing cafeteria Christianity.
Yeah. Well, today's cool kids always say, keep it real, but you got to wonder, are you really keeping it real? Am I really seeing the real you, or is it just part of the layer, part of the mask, like you said? And are you really being authentic? Because like I say, we create these personalities to deal with other personalities that got damaged. And I thank God that I got to a point where I don't need a protector. I don't need that person no more. I don't, because I completely lean on Christ. But I say there was a process I had to go through.
Right.
And the process was trusting to tell my story to people so they can help me with my story.
Right.
So we can look. So we can look back at the stuff that says, well, that event happened, but it doesn't define me as a human being.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the point I'm at now, is that, you know, I've had so much stuff happen to me for the longest time that I let that define me. I was hacked off at God for a really long time. He and I had a lot of arguments about, why'd you let this happen to me? But where I am now is that I know that through those one, I know God never abandoned me, even though I convinced myself of that numerous times. I know he never abandoned me. I know it wasn't his will, but we also live in a fallen world.
Right.
But what I can say is that now I know that the experiences I've had allow me to relate to a wider audience. And he is giving me that audience.
Yeah.
You know, he's allowed me to be on nearly 100 podcasts in just 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of things opening up. You know, speak at national conferences. So, you know, and my coaching clients. So, you know, it's not for the faint of heart. But and I would go back real quickly. I know we're running out of time. When we go back real quickly to your other comment about, you know, keeping it real. That doesn't mean that you wear your life on your sleeve with every person you meet.
Right.
There is wisdom.
Yes.
There's wisdom and discernment that is needed. But what it does mean is that Jesus had 12 close apostles.
Yeah.
Those are the people he spent his life with. Those are the ones that he was real with. Those are the ones that he invested in and let invest in him as well.
True.
And I'm not saying you got to have a circle of 12, but I am saying the principle is there for connection. And the principle is there to have a couple people that you will let in and walk with you through the mud and the mire, because you know they're going to not let you fall, and they're going to carry you and walk with you through the other side.
All right.
That's the charge we all have. Jesus Christ exemplified that through choosing his 12. So it doesn't mean you got to be real with every single person you meet. There is discernment, there is caution involved, because your story is sacred. And it's not one to be told to every single person.
That's true.
Which sometimes that's why some of us have counselors, because they can't tell anybody. So
right.
So I just want to circle back to that before I went down.
Yeah. Well, you know, first, Sue, tell us about the books you've written, and give my audience some idea about how they can find your books and all that stuff.
This is the book. It's called This Much I Know, The Space Between.
Okay.
It is on Amazon and Kindle. And
Great.
It came out in 2019.
Okay.
And won second place nonfiction in November 2020.
Okay.
So my first book, it's self-published. So getting the award and that recognition tells me I'm on the right path. The book is my story. You know, I've alluded to a lot of things that I didn't go into. The first half of the book, the concept behind the title is This Much I Know Is My Story.
Okay.
All of us have a story. And that is the one thing nobody can take from us. Now, just like Michael was just saying, how we let that affect us. Do we let those events define us, or do we spin them on their head and define them? That's how we're all writing our story now. So the first half of my story, the different events that I experienced, and important people in my life, and how they had a role in my life that I came to see numerous years later. The second half, the space between, talks about the healing journey that God took me on, and still has me on. So it talks about these retreats. It talks about in detail more of what happened when I finally let go. It wasn't God breaking through, it was me letting go. I share a couple of my journal entries from, you know, as things were happening, of what God was doing in my life. And I talk about how I had to own my story, how I had to grieve it, and then knowing that I was valuable. And so it goes into a lot more detail about that. So that's on Amazon and Kindle. You can also go to my website. There's a link to it there. The website is SueBowles.com. I'm sure Michael will have it in the show notes. And then there's even mystepahead.com as well. But the second book I'm working on now is This Much I Know is going to be a 3-part series.
Okay.
The second book has a working title of This Much I Know, It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And we're going to dig into the stuff you and I just talked about why these struggles are there.
Right.
Why do we feel like we can't, why do we feel like we have to keep up with the Joneses? Wear the masks. and different resources available and those kind of things. The third book, the concept, working title, is going to be 45 Minutes in Time, and it's going to talk about life-altering events. And that was the length of time my rapist held me. And the 45 Minutes in Time is going to talk about life's defining moments and how we were talking about how we reframe them, how we go from them defining us to us defining the effect they have on us.
Wow.
And then I have a fourth book concept in mind too, called Grace Waves, and that talks more about just when you can feel God is really working, and that grace gets you through the tough times. So
wow,
a lot of ideas. They haven't quite made it all out the finger yet, my fingers onto the keyboard yet, but working on it. So
all right. Well, I got to ask you one more question before I let you go.
Sure.
What's your favorite book of the Bible?
My favorite book of the Bible is Philippians. It is meat. Okay. I started memorizing. I worked at Kanakuk Christian Sports Camp in Missouri for 5 years, and I started memorizing it while I was out there. I need to brush up, but I had chapters 1 and 2 and going into part of 3 memorized. I need to brush up on it, so that if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
But with it, there's just so much meat in there that if you really slow down and read it one verse at a time and one paragraph at a time and not a chapter at a time, there's just so much meat and potatoes in there.
Exactly. Well,
and on that note, if I can leave your listeners with this.
Go ahead, please.
This is why one of the reasons Philippians is my favorite book, but it's also my encouragement to you. Philippians 1:6. I am convinced of this, that he who began a good work in you will complete it until the day of Christ Jesus.
That's powerful. Wow, that's definitely powerful. Well, with that being said, Sue, thank you very much for appearing on Clergy Talk Podcast. You gave us some much needed information, and I hope somebody will listen to your advice and go get the help they need. And with that being said, I'm going to continue to pray for your healing, pray for your success, pray for your ministry, and pray for your entire family. And I hope you have a beautiful and blessed year.
I appreciate that, Michael. Just real quick, I do offer a 15-minute consultation, so people can go to my website, SueBowles.com. There's a form there. Fill that out. If there's something I can do to help you, I open up my schedule a few times a year to take on a few new clients. Okay. I'm in that window right now, so I have availability, and if there's something I can do to help you, I'd be happy to do that. I've shared with you a little bit of some of the different things I help with coaching with. So please reach out to me. Let me know. I'd love to come alongside you and help you out.
Thank you for that, because I hope somebody takes advantage of that opportunity.
I hope so.
All right. You have a great day, and thank you again one more time for being on Clergy Talk.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.